This business is all about relationships and relationships with reps and subs and just calling and saying, hey, we spent X amount of money on this year. If I can get a better margin on it, I can double it. Most of the times they say yes because they need to make money too. And I think just calling people, emailing them and saying, this is what I can do for you. What can you do for me? Because we're out here selling their product. You need to make money from it.
Hey everyone, it's Mary Beth, co-founder and CEO at Materio. In today's episode, we dive deep with Alexa Stevenson as she shares her journey from magazine editor in New York City to launching her design firm ASID in 2010. We also dive into how she built her business from the ground up, developed her signature style, and the evolution of her team. Alexa also shares the biggest challenges she's faced, the story behind her company, Lex King, and what clients are asking for now and in the future. Let's dive in. Hi, Alexa. Thanks for joining us today. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I think first, I just want to get kind of the download on you. I think we've spoken in the past about kind of when you first started with Materio, and I'm quickly realizing there's so much I don't know about how you got to where you are. So would you mind sharing kind of how you've gotten to where you are? I know you were an editor for a few years, or if not years, in New York, and I had no idea. So I'm very curious to hear more about how you became the designer you are today.
Yes. So I was a journalism major, not an interior design major. And I went to New York in my 20s. I spent my 20s there. I worked for Oprah Magazine. I worked for Women's Day. And then I ended up at these luxury shelter magazines in Connecticut, New York, Palm Beach, and the Hamptons. And that's kind of when, it was a very small operation. I did everything. I was at the D&D building every day. I met all these incredible designers, Bunny Williams, Charlotte Moss, Jamie Drake, interviewing them, shooting their projects. It was just an amazing education. I mean, it was an insane place to work, but it was an amazing learning experience. And then magazines, I don't know if you guys remember, back in like 2007 when everything sort of collapsed and it was like Domino and then House and Garden and then just everyone. And I was like, oh, this is not looking good for me long term. So I started working for William Yoward. He was a British designer doing his crystal licensing, sort of random. But I also learned a lot from him about wholesale and retail and all of that kind of good stuff. And I then started going to classes at the New York School of Interior Design, which I then did drop out. I don't recommend that. But I had gotten enough clients to where I was like, well, I don't think I need this. Then we moved to Athens in 2013, and I just kind of had to start over and just sort of slowly built my client base from word of mouth, I guess.
You were working, doing the licensing in the crystal business, William Yoward. And is that the moment where you started to think about design? Like, when did you start getting those clients? You mentioned you had clients, you dropped out of school. Like, what was...
Well, I think when I was working for Cottages and Gardens, that really sparked the design bug in me. And I loved going to the D&D building. I loved textiles. I loved the furniture market, and we went to High Point. I went to the tile fair in Bologna, Italy. We did kitchen and bath. And so that I just kind of got obsessed with all of that stuff. And I was also doing photo shoots because when you work for a place where there's not many people that work there, you do everything. And I was styling photo shoots and I was moving furniture around, and that kind of was my love for design. I mean, I've always been very aesthetically minded, I would say. I really like pretty things. I really like things to be a certain way. So I think that kind of spurred me on. And I think I kind of thought, well, I'll go take this job and I'll take classes on the side. I think people heard I was doing that and I just started getting clients. I don't think if I hadn't had known the market and known all these brands that were to the trade only, that would have been a really difficult thing. Because I think a lot of people start out not knowing, well, there is a whole world of stuff that we can shop from that no one else knows about. And I think just knowing the market is so helpful. So any way that you can kind of get that experience is really, really helpful.
Sure. Do you feel like because you got exposure to that and kind of the glamorous side of design in a way, I feel like that's a very, at least for others, a glamorous angle to take and getting to see, magazines and styling all really close up. Do you feel like that had an impact or negatively or positively on when you first started and you thought, okay, like I'm not actually maybe going that glamorous, or were you like, I'm going all in. I know that it's possible, so I'm just going to go for it.
I think I just wanted to kind of see where it went. I actually just took over another office space next to my office where it is now. And we were laughing. My husband and I were laughing because he was like, well, when we moved to Athens, like you started at the dining room and then you were like, well, I guess we need to close in my porch and get an office. And then that was for a couple of years. And I was like, well, I guess I need to get an outside office. And then this last month, I was like, well, I guess I need to get another space. And I think for me, every year, it's just sort of, do I want to go big or do I want to stay small? And I think I keep leveling up for better or for worse.
Yeah.
So, I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, that's also when I started my business, I quit my full-time job when I was like, okay, I think I have enough to do this. And then a month later, I was like, oh, well, I'm pregnant, like with my first child. So I didn't know what to expect.
It always happens that way. Plan a life change and then
Yeah.
something big happens.
Right.
What would you say, it sounds like you started this firm almost 14 years ago? No.
About, yeah.
10 years. Yeah. So what's one of the
13, yes.
That's exciting. So what would you say, like over the course of that time and growing from your dining room table to now having, acquiring more and more office space, what's been some of the biggest challenges in growing?
Gosh, there's a lot. I mean, I think the biggest challenge is once you realize you need to hire people, that is a challenge because then you have to manage those people. And then if they're late, it's going to drive you crazy. And you just, it's a whole another section of your brain you have to use because it's not just you doing it and you're relying on other people to get stuff done so you can get stuff done. And I think learning how to be a good manager has been a challenge because I've always just done this myself. I think definitely one thing I learned probably a little later than I should have was, hire a bookkeeper, just like take all that stuff off your plate because that is it's just so much. And then when I started making like profit and I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And it was just such a big relief. So I would say those were my biggest challenges.
Who was the first person you hired?
I've had a lot of like young girls kind of come through because I kind of like started, I think it was Mary Carson, who now is in Charleston working for a very good designer. But a lot of my people have I've got one girl working for Nate Burgess in Chicago, and then another one in New York working for Elizabeth Belendigno. So it's exciting. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I feel like that means you're very comfortable with the idea of fostering younger designers, like showing them your process. Obviously, they're working for you. I think when I talk to some designers, they're a little bit hesitant bringing on junior people. They're worried if they invest too much in that person and then they leave, right, that they've made that investment. How do you think about nurturing those younger people maybe out of school or just people who are looking to learn the ropes? I
want people to learn from me, and I've always had great bosses and mentors, and I don't think I'm 46 years old. I'm not going to be doing this forever. Hopefully, we need the young people to kind of come up and show us how it's done and keep us young. And then I love seeing my people go off and be in New York and be in Chicago and sending me pictures. Like, it makes me particularly proud. And I think it's great. I think nurturing young people and being a mentor is one of the best things you can do in this industry. I think you have to.
And I guess you also went from being in school in Georgia, right, to New York when you were, that was what,
yes.
So you kind of took the leap. I've done that. I graduated from Auburn University and moved to New York to be a designer out of school. And I feel like it makes such a difference when you go to a city like that, from a smaller place, and you have someone to wrap their arms around you and really support you. And I feel like even getting the exposure to your firm and then making a leap, I think I can see where that would be really helpful and really exciting for you to see them grow and take the next step.
Yeah, and I guess for me, it's like I'm just not worried about competition. There's a client for everyone. Not all clients, not all people are going to want to hire me. Not all people are going to want to hire the other designers in this town. There's so many clients for each particular designer.
I think that's a good segue into this idea that I think you have this insane ability to combine like pattern, and you have this very unique style when you look at your work. How did you get to that? How did you develop that distinct style? I mean, like you said, you have a style, and I'm sure your clients come to you for that.
So, yeah, I love color. Obviously, I love pattern. I always have. And it's so interesting. I had a very weird childhood. I grew up in Columbus, Buffalo, New York, Southampton, and Hobe Sound. Like, no one else in this country split their time between those places. And my maternal grandmother was super glamorous and chic. And when she lived in Atlanta, she lived in a condo that was like acrylic, like modern art, but mixed with antiques, but super modern, but cool. She was just very cool and glamorous. And then my paternal grandmother was very old school, like Mario Botta, chintz, bridge, like heron, little heron figurines that held lighters back when you could smoke. But both of them had this sense of the way they mixed things was just incredible to me. And I've just grown up like that, and I just love that. And I think what both of them had in common was their spaces were just so comfortable, beautiful, but also like comfortable. Because I feel like when you want to come home, you want to be like, oh, I feel so good. Like I always ask people, what do you want your interiors to feel like? Like, what do you want to feel like when you walk in the door? Like, I want to feel like happy and warm and cozy. And you don't have to do, dark grays and navy blues to feel cozy. It's just, I love pattern. It's like art. I love fabrics. I just love to be surrounded by it. And I don't even know if it was like something I tried to do. I just do it,
It's just in you. I love that. Speaking of like fabric and texture and all these things, so you have another company, not just your design firm,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Can we talk about Lex King? It seems like that is right up this alley. So talk about that and how did that come about? I mean, that's a totally different business, I guess.
Totally different business. And it's, I call it my side hustle. So I have a very good friend, Kingsley Strong, and she does not work in design, but she has a love of design and has worked for showrooms in Atlanta in the past. And she also loves material and fabric, and like her favorite thing to do is to come to my office and like look through materials. And so we just kind of started talking about it one day, like we should sell table linens, because I eventually want to have some make my own textiles. And I was thinking, well, this might be a good like segue for me just like to see how it works. Like, we're not putting a lot of money in Lex King. We're just kind of seeing what happens. We talked about it for like a year. And I had a huge bookkeeping disaster with someone that had worked for me. It kind of really messed some stuff up. So I had to spend all of my time on the weekends fixing things. And like one day I sat down on a Saturday, I was like, I'm just going to sit and I'm going to try to focus on this. And I don't like numbers. I don't like that stuff. So I made a website, I made a logo, came up with a name, I started an Instagram, and I sent it to Kingsley. I was like, well, now Lex King has an Instagram and a website. Oh, and I bought some stuff, so we're going to start selling it. So now you have to do it. So that's kind of how it came, and that's been an interesting evolution too. I mean, it's just been a year to see what sells to the masses, which probably is not my forte. But just, we couldn't find stuff that we liked. So then we've started having stuff made, which I think is incredible. But then, we're waiting 6 months for it to come. But it's been really fun. And it's also been a learn as we go kind of thing, because it is so different from actual like design and selling products to clients.
Do you get to kind of overlap them at any point? Do you try to style your projects with those, with the items from Lex King?
Sure. Or you like, when I shoot my projects, I'll take some Lex King. I feel kind of weird being like, oh, buy this Lex King. But, and my clients are amazing and will all support me. And like, of course, they all have bought something. But yes, it's been fun. It's been definitely a learning experience. And we just launched a collection with Sun House Children's, which is another local Athens girl, Hollis McFadden, who makes these beautiful children's clothing. So that's also been super fun.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I'll have to check that out. Everybody check that out.
Yeah, please check out Lex King.
Okay, let's nerd out a little bit on like more of process and team. So I don't actually know, we kind of talked about how you outgrew your current space or you're kind of adding on to your current space. What is your team structure now? How many people do you have working for you?
So it's me, and then it's Ross King, who is kind of like junior designer, procurement coordinator, kind of, everything. And then I've got another girl, Carson Wilcox, who's part-time, and I would say she just kind of does whatever's left over needs to be doing, organizing the memo closet, adding stuff to material, pricing, etc. And then, obviously I have a bookkeeper and an accountant and that kind of thing, but they're contract.
When you're bringing on new people, how do you ensure that they really understand your process and your systems and how you want your projects run?
Well, when we were talking about like what your challenges are, I think one of my challenges is I am so self-sufficient. I am so just figure it out, that I realize that not everyone is like that. And so the thing I always tell my team when we're talking about subs and clients, they can't read your mind. You have to give them all of the information. No one reads your mind. No one knows what you're thinking. And I have to remind myself to say that to my team a lot too. Like, they can't read my mind. They don't. So I try to be like, this is how I like it. This is how I like it, until it kind of beats in their head. I'll say we'll have a meeting every Monday morning, and that's sometimes when I'm like, now remember, we have to do it this way, this way, this way, and this way. I think that's probably one of the hardest parts of my job.
Yeah, I feel that. I can feel that running a team.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, can't you just read my mind? Oh no, you cannot.
Exactly. Be like, just figure it out.
Today's episode is brought to you by Materio. Materio is an all-in-one project management system made for interior designers and design build firms to operationalize your projects. And whether you heard it in this episode or somewhere else, Materio is going to be the place to streamline communication, manage your selections, and make sure that you can hand off documents and deliverables all to your contractors and your trades. To learn more about Materio, you can visit www.materio.co or check us out on Instagram at materio.co. Part of the thing that I've noticed just working with designers, especially those interested in Materio, which is very much like a system, right? Like we try to have a flow, is it's hard to create, standard operating procedures in a design firm where, you as the head of the owner of the firm is thinking about creativity and what you want the projects to look like. Your brain is not really actively thinking about the steps that you have to take in order to get the thing done. And so I think when you come from doing it yourself, and you're very self-sufficient, like you said, it's harder to get those processes written down and take them and kind of just easily bring someone on board. Well, let me ask you this. I'm curious, you're 14 years in, almost 14 years in, and you've got a few people on your team, and you obviously use Materio. That's why we're talking today, because that's how I know you. Are you consciously doing anything in your practice to try to build longevity? You mentioned like Lex King is new, but your firm seems pretty like that's your thing, that's your main focus. How do you think about building the business? Or maybe not. You mentioned not doing it forever. I'm just curious what you project there.
I say that as a joke. I'm probably will work forever because I love it. But I think it's just constantly thinking of ways to bring in more revenue that is not just design. I've had a lot of ups and downs, and like this year's an election year, so I feel like things kind of will slow down, and we'll see what happens in November. And if it's something like, we never used to sell like plumbing fixtures, and I was like, all right, well, we're speccing enough of this, or we got to make some money on it. So we made some phone calls, getting better margins and stuff. So I think it's just like little things like that. And it's like, instead of buying rugs now, I have someone who makes them, and just finding that kind of stuff where I can have a better margin to support my company and support my staff and keep growing without having to be, change my markup system or do something crazy. In Athens, I'm not going to hike my fees up or anything because I don't, we're not a big city. So I've got to find other ways. And I think it's really just being creative in the market and finding stuff that I love and I can either have made or get better trade prices instead of just like, the 40% or whatever, because then I feel like I'm providing better value to my client while also making more money for the company. And it's just kind of finding like little avenues like that do kind of add up to bringing some more income in, because we can't always rely on full house projects, that kind of thing. And that way it also gives me the ability to take on smaller projects if I think I'm going to make more money on the product side.
I guess that's very interesting to think about. Okay, well, we're speccing a lot of plumbing. Let's go figure out how to make, get a relationship with someone who we can make more money on the plumbing fixtures. For other designers listening to this, if they're maybe haven't specifically thought about that, is there something you could encourage them with, or something you could talk about in your process where you hit a moment and realize, okay, we've done this on X amount of projects, or however you think about it, and say, and this is how I take the next step. What's the next step to figure out, to go from, I'm speccing a lot of this, but who do I call? What's the best channel? How do you approach that type of relationship, perhaps?
I think you just kind of see, and we like to do that, and see what we are buying a lot of and what is kind of a common denominator. And, this business is all about relationships and relationships with reps and subs, and just calling and saying, hey, we spent X amount of money on this year. If I can get a better margin on it, I can double it. And I just think asking is something you have to do, because they can say no. And I think just having done this for a long time, I have a lot more confidence in saying things like, you have a minimum of $2,000 for me to open this account. Well, I only need one lamp, but if you let me buy this one lamp, I promise you I will keep buying more stuff.
Right.
And just saying that, and then saying, this is how much I do in sales per year. You can take it or leave it. And most of the times they say yes, because they need to make money too. And I think just calling people, emailing them and saying, this is what I can do for you. What can you do for me? Because we're out here selling their product. You need to make money from it. So I just think it's bottom line saying, like, we have been selling so much of this. A lot of the fabric companies I work with, they'll give me free shipping now because I've bought so much. And just ask. That's all you have to do is just ask.
I love that. That was actually one of I'll never forget, at our wedding, this is a long time ago, but at my husband and I's wedding, his best man did this whole speech, and it was just ask, like, don't be afraid to ask. And I don't even remember the rest of it, but I always remember that. So Alexa feels the same, just ask. I think that's great. I think one of the challenges potentially for maybe younger designers who are like just literally getting started is we're in such a digital world now where it's easy to say no to in-person events or in-person relationship building. How do you find that you can keep that up when you are in a world where, you can reach someone across the world by phone very easily or email, but how do you kind of keep those trade relationships or vendor relationships going?
Well, it's so funny you say that about the phone. That's one thing. And, we live in a college town, so I do have like a lot of young people that will come through my office as interns, and they will not pick up the phone, and it just drives me insane. And I'll say, just call them. Just call them on the phone. You can get the answer. I don't want to hear that you emailed them. That could have taken 5 seconds on the phone, and now I've waited 2 days. So I really insist on that. And, I guess also I was a journalism major too. So I'm just like, we got to find out. Let's pick up the phone. And I think rep relationships, you should pick up the phone and call them. If you see it on Instagram that they've had a baby or something, congratulate them, because it is such a relationship that they want you to sell your product. I want them to say, oh my God, it's had arrived damaged. Let me fix it for you right away, Alexa. Like, thank you so much. So I just always encourage, anytime they want to come in for a line show, it's so easy to say, no, I'm busy, or I'm going to cancel last minute. Those are so important, just getting that face-to-face with your rep, going into the showrooms, just introducing yourself, that kind of thing. It's just so important for them to know that you're nice and that you're a person and you're not just like hiding on email.
Are there any in-person events or particular groups or anything that you're a part of that you recommend other designers check out?
I mean, I am in a very small town, so no. But I would say if you live in a bigger town, that has events at like the design centers, just go to those. It's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to meet like reps. It's also a great way to meet other designers, because you might become friends with some other designers. And when we're all friends here saying like, hey, like Alexa, I have this client. She wants to do this. It's just totally out of my wheelhouse. Do you want to take it? Like blah, 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 blah. Or even just questions like, this workroom's backed up. Do you have another one? So just meet as many people as you can. And I just, again, want to reiterate, like, I'm not a competitive person. There's clients for everyone. And I feel like, we're kind of all in this together. So just get out there and just introduce yourself. Don't be scared to do that.
Let's talk about your projects and just like the types of projects that you're doing. I mean, are you working with a contractor most of the time? Just tell everyone what's your work like.
We do everything from small decorating projects. Like right now I'm just doing like a refresh for a little cottage that's just some wallpaper and some new upholstery and new window treatments and stuff. But then I also do new builds and renovations and big, huge projects, whole house projects. So I would say that when I started out, though, I never expected myself to get into construction. And I tell the carpenter that I work very closely with and have for 8 years, I'm not in construction. And he's always like, Alexa, you're in construction. Like you do it. I'm not in construction, but I am in construction. I have one carpenter that I work with kind of exclusively on a lot of projects, but I'll work with the contractors who have been hired by the client and then bring me in. And I work with some, I'm working with a contractor now in St. Simons. I'm working on one in Columbus, Georgia. So
you're all over. Are you doing projects just in Georgia for the most part? I mean, are you going back to New York and doing projects, or are you doing e-design?
I've got a couple projects in New York. We just finished one in Florida. I finished one in Boston last year. And I think ever since COVID, it's been a lot easier to say I don't have to travel as much. I mean, my installer in New York, they set up a camera with the guys, and I'm there on the camera telling them where to put stuff and da-da-da-da-da. And then usually I'll go in at the final and kind of fluff. So it's just been easier, I think, to do this remotely because I don't really do e-design. I like to kind of be hands-on, and I've found that ever since COVID, it's been so much easier to do that kind of thing.
Right. How do you find those, like the installer in New York who's willing to put up a camera and let you tell them what to do? How do you find those people when you're not in that city?
I just ask. But I do think since COVID, that became more of a thing. So, and I've been using the same receiver in New York since I lived there. And again, I just said, hey, I'm not coming out for this. So can we set something up? And they said, sure. So, and again, I think that's also like having a relationship with them and knowing them. And so, and I'm not saying that everyone would do that, but I think in the bigger cities, it's probably easier to find. Yes.
Sure. I guess in thinking about technology and the future of design and the future of this industry, I think that's a very small example, right? Of just being willing to participate in more of an online experience. Is there anything that you can foresee or hope for maybe in the future of design that has to do kind of with technology and design in the same space?
I'm not very excited about like AI in design so much because I think that's going to give people realistic expectations. But I also don't know what kind of capabilities it's going to have. I think, again, it's just kind of like I said, like being able to have clients that aren't in your backyard. And I don't think there is ever replacing me being on site and seeing it and moving a chair over 2 inches. Like, no, I just do not think you can replace that ever. But I do love that I can work with these contractors and these receivers and not be there. I mean, I think Materio is so wonderful for that, for these projects I have. Like, I just send them my little plumbing spec sheet that I download, and everyone's like, wonderful, thanks, great, thank you. And it being marked up with the plans, I think that is something that will hopefully change design a little bit of clients feeling like they don't have to have someone in the town.
When it comes to clients, just like a little bit of a pivot here, what is something that maybe clients were not asking for a year or two ago that you find them asking for a lot now? And maybe this has to do with them seeing trends and things like that. And then what would be something you can envision they might ask for 2 years from now that you see designers already starting to do?
Mary Beth, that is a hard question. I am not a trend follower though, so I don't know. I mean, I do think, and this might just be my personal opinion and stuff I'm doing with my clients, I have long been please stop with the open concept houses, please.
Yes,
please.
Can I get an amen?
Wow.
I want a nook.
Yes, all the nooks. And I definitely have had a few projects where we're putting up walls, again, in houses that have been flipped and they moved in and took down everything. And I do kind of feel like maybe a sitting room might be coming back because, I'm helping someone kind of with their plans and there's one living room. And I said, well, you know what? You've got two boys. They're little. I've got two boys. They're 12 and 10. One of them loves sports. He and my husband sit in one room and watch sports, and me and my 10-year-old sit in the other living room and play backgammon. But we're still, and just having different areas to go to do different things is such a luxury. I feel like I don't want to see my kitchen. I don't like to cook. I don't want to see it. I don't like it. But it doesn't need to be the center of the universe. And I think I prefer to be the center of the universe is like a really pretty place where I can sit with my family and talk. And my living room is super pretty. My husband calls it just the Christmas tree room, but there's no TV in it. And You know what I have found is that my middle school child and his friends, if I'm sitting in here, they'll come sit in here and we sit and chat. And it's just amazing because there's no TV. It's set up so nicely to sit and chat because that's what it is set up for. So I'm hoping that the open concept is going to die in the next 2 years. And I do see people kind of thinking okay, well, maybe we do need another room where I can sit and read and I don't have to go up to my room and read if my whole family's doing something downstairs that I don't want to be a part of.
I love it so much. I feel like one of the things that this is kind of in line with that, and I kind of want to ask how you take this approach with your clients, but I think it's designing for our life, like actually designing, not to resell. And there was so much, I feel like, of a hype around designing for resale when the housing market was insane. And totally. I feel like maybe now we can all just enjoy our spaces a little bit. And also, if you're the one who's going to be doing a project soon, working with your designer or you working with your client, thinking about what do I do in the mornings? Like I have a routine. I wake up at 5 a.m. I spend some time by myself. I have a place to do that. And I had to kind of develop that place in my house. It wasn't here when I bought the house. And so I'm hoping that designers, that's kind of your job, right? Is to lean into that, what your clients need. But I'm hoping clients can also realize that that is a beautiful part of working with a designer is they can help them think about the function of their home.
Absolutely. Yes.
So how do you do that now with your clients? Like, do you have a specific intake process or is it just experiential?
We'll do, I have a little questionnaire that I have people fill out. I have, people send me inspo pictures and Pinterest boards and whatever. And I think one of the most important questions that I ask, and this is something I got from when I was working for the magazines, when I was interviewing people, I would always ask, well, how does this house feel to you? What does it feel like? And I mentioned this earlier, I'll say, well, what do you want to feel like when you come here? What do you want to feel like in this room? Because to me, that kind of helps me understand what they need. And, yesterday I met with some new clients and they're young and they just bought a house. And I said, okay, well, show me where you're going to walk in. Where are you going to walk in every day? Like, where are you going to park your car and walk in every day? And they were like, oh, I don't know. I guess right here. And I'm like, okay, so then we need a table right here. And they were like, why? And I'm like, because that's where you're going to put your keys in your bag and da-da-da-da-da. And I'll do that a lot, walk through the house and say, what do you do here? Like, where do you guys play? Where do you do homework? Do you read with your feet on the sofa? Do you like to have an ottoman? Like, do you like to sit in a chair when you do that? Like, if you're working, do you like to work at a desk or do you work on the sofa or do you like to work at the kitchen table? That kind of thing. So it's just so important to ask how they want to function in their house.
Yeah.
So you can design for that.
I have a bonus design question for you. I love puzzles and I want a puzzle table. My husband hates puzzles and doesn't want a puzzle table. So what piece of furniture do I need?
What you need is the puzzle tray that fits a puzzle, and then you can move it around.
Yeah, I just can't buy huge puzzles anymore. They have to be a manageable size puzzle.
And that's another thing, people have been getting rid of the dining room.
Yeah.
So I'm like, bring back the dining room, guys, because guess what? One kid's going to do homework here, maybe on the island, maybe not. The other one might want to sit here. Or, just I like to have surfaces and places to sit.
Yeah, we need a dining table.
Yes, you need a dining table.
I'm thinking about one of my requirements is we're looking back in New York at apartments, and I'm like, I need a dining table that I can have 4 people over to dinner. That's my requirement. I just want to have. It doesn't have to be a big apartment, but I need to have a dining table. That's it. Yeah. So I'm all for the dining table. I wanted to touch on journalism because you just mentioned this, and sort of how when you were a journalist, you were like, let's just go ask. We've got to find out what it is. That's maybe not a common background for a lot of designers. So what is a tip for, maybe it's in that client intake and that kind of client consultation phase? What's one tip from a previous journalist that can help designers ask better questions or learn more from their clients?
It's not really a question that you need to ask them. I think it's just really listening to them. And I don't consider myself an artist. Really, I'm a service-based business. I'm here to do your house, and I want to translate your vision in a way that, obviously it's going to kind of look like me because I did it, but I'm really client focused. I am really client focused, not I think. And I think just really like listening and hearing them say, we're not going to use that. And you have to know if they're just saying that because they're scared of change, or if they're like, no, like this is not how our family works. And it's very rare that I leave a project and I'm not very close with my client and their family, even if I've never met them. I mean, in person, So I think it's just really kind of, again, it's like just building a relationship and asking the right questions of how they want to live, because some people don't even know how they want to live until you start kind of asking the questions and you're kind of able to piece it together. And again, I think I've said this now like 3 times, how the room feels is such a great question to ask clients, because that can express a lot more to you than like them showing you a picture of like, I like this room, because they're just going to be showing you a pretty room. So I think it's just really important to listen. And it's not about you, it's about them.
I can definitely relate to that, even from the material perspective. So I think that's one of the approaches we take with our customers is not to sell material. We're here to serve. And so in order to serve you, we have to listen very carefully and dig deeper and listen carefully and take away maybe what you're saying. Again, same thing. Is it a fear of change? Is it a structural thing? And then take all of those learnings and then develop a solution for it. So I think it's an interesting parallel to sort of how we work here, actually. I think last kind of segue in here is just like, or last question is really about risk. So it seems like you're someone who has definitely taken risk over the years. I mean, you've started your own firm, which is always a risk. And just you've started another business, right? Lex King, that's a risk. So talk to me about maybe one of the biggest risks you took recently from a design perspective, and maybe one maybe not risk, but maybe something a little bit risky that you'd like to try in the future.
This is so weird. I was just talking to someone about this the other day about risk in design. And my answer then was, I don't know if I really take risk in design, because if I'm pushing something, it might be risky for the client, but it's not risky for me because I think it's going to be great. And I know it's going to be great. And I'm confident in myself. So I can't really think of any design risk I've taken. Again, I think if it's a risk on the client's side, not on my side, just because I'm believe in myself and know that I'm a really good designer and it's going to look good. Taking over this office space was a risk, and I just decided to do that last month because that's a whole nother expense, doubling my expenses. So I think that was a risk. And I'm much riskier in my business life than I am in my personal life. I don't know what that is, but I'm also just like, I'm in my 40s. I don't really care anymore. Like, I'm just, not that I don't care anymore. I don't really care what people think of me. I'm more confident than I was when I first started out. So it's easy for me to say, we're going to do this, and it works or it doesn't work.
How do you make your clients believe in that risk? Like, if it's a client risk, how do you convince them?
With interior design, it's just a lot about trust too. And, it's a relationship. And I just, it's usually they say, okay, like sometimes it's usually kind of comes around to like, no. And then like, I'll get a text like, okay, I trust you. They know I'm not going to do anything bad. And then I'm always like, but if it's bad, we'll just change it. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, this isn't heart surgery. Again, I think it's a confidence thing. I don't think even 5 or 6 years ago, I could talk people into that because I'd be scared. Well, they say they don't like it, so it's not going to work. And now I'm confident enough to know this is going to work. So you should just do it. Just try it. Just do it. It's going to be great.
What gave you that confidence? Like, what was was there one pivotal moment where you're like, and now I realize that nothing else like really matters, and I can push this?
I mean, I think that just kind of came with time. And, honestly, the busier I got, the less I think about things. You know what I'm saying? Like, when I first started out and only had a few clients, I would just focus on things so much, like, oh, they didn't say they liked it or whatever. And now I forgot what I installed yesterday. I don't even remember that. So I think the busier I got, the easier it was not to just dwell on things. But again, I just think I've been in business a long time. I know what I'm doing. I'm not scared to say when I don't know what I'm doing, which I think is also really important for designers to do. My clients trust me. I trust myself. I trust my team. And I know that pretty much everything is fixable. So kind of just came with time and having enough projects to where I'm like comfortable enough to know what I'm doing.
All right, I lied. There's one more question that I have for you, which is, what is the best piece of advice that any of your mentors ever gave you that you'd like to share with others?
This is kind of a longer story. I will try to wrap it up neatly. When I worked in the magazines, we had a very good get one issue. We shot Michael Kors' house. The magazine went to print, and Michael Kors was spelled wrong on the cover. There's nothing we could do about it. And no one would admit who did it, though we all kind of knew who did it, but no one would say anything. And our publisher, the big boss, is very scary, and I learned so much from him, but he was also terrifying. So he just could not get it out of us, like, who did it? Like, and he would just come back and he'd yell at us. And one day we're all like sitting there, and he is on fire yelling at us. Like, it was just one of those days where like, And finally I just said, I did it. It's my fault. I'm sorry. Tell me how to fix it. So then he just looks at me and goes, come to my office. And I was like, oh my God. So I go and sit in his office, and he kind of stares at me for a little bit, and he says, how much money do you make here? And I told him, and he goes, well, that's not that much. And I said, nope, it's not. And so then he gets on the phone and calls in the HR person, and I'm like, oh God. So he comes in, and he says to the guy, can we afford to double Alexa's salary right now? And then the guy was like, well, I just have to go check, but we could do something like that. And I was like, what is happening? Like, what is happening? So then he leaves, and this is like, the big boss says, I'm giving you a raise. I mean, and I was like, okay, why? I mean, I was 25 years old. And he was like, because you just have to admit your mistakes and move on. Sitting around pointing fingers is a waste of time, and we've just wasted a whole day when we could have been fixing the problem. And I said, well, thank you. And he goes, but I want to know, who did it? And I said, I'm not going to say. So he goes, don't say anything to anyone when you get back in. So I just went and sat back down, and they were like, are you fired? And I was like, no. But anyway, I just think with clients, obviously I don't think I'm ever going to get that much of a raise or anything from admitting my mistakes, but just saying like, oops, I'm sorry. You know what? I forgot that. I didn't do it. I messed up. We forgot to order it. My bad. It's so much better than coming up with some sort of blame game or making excuses or getting defensive. I didn't do it. I'll fix it. Let's move on. Especially in our industry, because there's so many things we can mess up on. That is a lesson that will stay with me for a very, very long time.
It's a great story. It also, I think it's a really powerful kind of example of valuing your time. You were young, and at the time that was a big boss person who was worried about, the boss is worried about who did this, because we got to figure out not to make this mistake again, but he's expensive, right? His time was expensive, and he's sitting there worrying about it. So in a way, he doubles your salary, but it also means he doesn't have to spend another week, maybe debating it, which is his mental energy and time. So I think one takeaway I'm taking from that is it's absolutely important to, one, own up to your mistakes, but also value your time. Yeah, and I think designers struggle with that. And so I love that for everyone listening. Yes, we make mistakes. You should admit it, or just help your team learn how to own up to things. Like, I think that's also a great example you set of, I did it, even if you weren't the one who did it, right? You're like, I did it, so we can all move on. And just showing that that was a bold move, but it was okay. And it was the right thing to do, to just like let everyone keep going.
Yes.
So I love that. Thank you so much for coming on and joining me. And I'm excited to talk more in the future. Are you going to be at High Point this year?
No, it's so hard for me to get to High Point because of the boys' schedule. So hopefully I would like to go either in this spring or next fall.
Okay. Well, keep me posted if you go. I'll be there this time around and probably in the spring too. So maybe
good. Well, I hope that you have a great time.
I hope so too. All right. Thanks so much, Alexa. I'll talk soon.
Thanks, Mary Beth.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Designing Tomorrow. This podcast is brought to you by Materio. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, like, and leave us a comment below about what you thought.